Hello, welcome to the CalFresh Invoicing Guide process for federal fiscal year 2019 to 2021. Today we will discuss the invoicing process, required supporting invoice documentation, supplemental invoices, final billing, submitting an invoice, best practices, invoice disputes, invoice processing time, and semi-annual certification of activities. What is an invoice? An invoice is a contractor's request for reimbursement for allowable costs and activities directly related to CalFresh outreach. Allowable costs and activities are specified in the USDA guidance located on the CalFresh outreach website. You can also reach out to your program analyst for a copy of the current guidance. Required supporting invoice documentation: CalFresh Invoice Guide, Invoice and State Share Documentation, CalFresh Outreach Time and Effort Forms, and Travel Per Diem Receipts. CalFresh Invoice Guide, which is both the electronic and paper version. CalFresh Outreach is moving towards an electronic submission process. Time and Effort Forms and Per Diem Receipts can be electronic as well. However, Invoice and State Share Documentation paper version is still required. Invoice Guide categories: personnel salaries, fringe benefits, operating expenses, equipment expenses, travel and per diem, contracts, other costs, and indirect costs. Invoice and state share documentation: what signatures and dates are required on invoice and state share for processing? As indicated by the red arrows, we need a wet signature and date from project coordinators and authorized accounting representatives, not electronic, hard copies only. State share documentation: the contractor shall be reimbursed for services at a rate of not more than 77% of every allowable state share dollar that the contractor contributes and provides documentation for. Contractors are responsible for maintaining verified records of all state share contributions. This only applies to agencies providing state share, not applied to interagency agreements. CalFresh Outreach Time and Effort Forms: what signatures are required for each time and effort form processing? Make sure to include staff and supervisor wet signatures. To learn more about how to fill out your time and effort forms, see the other webinar about time and effort forms. Supplemental invoices: an invoice for expenses incurred during the term of the contract that have not been previously billed. Supplemental invoice limits: contractors may submit a maximum of 8 supplemental invoices during the contract term. They must cover a period of at least 3 months. Supplemental invoices documentation: the contractor must submit a written justification to accompany the supplemental invoices to the program analyst for approval. Supplemental income deadline: for the first, second, and third quarter, they are due no later than 90 days after the end of each quarter. Final billing: invoices for services must be received by CDSS within 90 days following the end of each state fiscal year or following the end of the contract term, whichever comes first. Final billing: check the correct box to indicate whether it is the final report for contract term and/or a final report for a fiscal year. Submitting an invoice: original accurate paper invoices shall be mailed or delivered either monthly or quarterly. This depends on what's been established by your analyst. Submitting an invoice: all invoices shall be mailed or delivered to the California Department of Social Services, CalFresh Outreach Unit, 744 P Street, MS 8932, Sacramento, California, 95814. Attention, whatever your analyst's name is. Best practices: invoices should be submitted within 60 days after the end of invoicing periods. Please do not change the invoice frequency during the fiscal year. Invoice dispute: During an invoice review, if the program analyst finds any discrepancy with the invoice, the program analyst will contact the contractor for clarification. If the contractor needs to submit a revised invoice, the program analyst will issue an STD 209, an invoice dispute notification to the contractor. An STD 209 invoice dispute notification formally notifies the contractor that the invoice is being disputed. It stops the clock on our invoice processing time. The clock starts again when a corrected invoice is resubmitted to CDSS. The top errors we find are unallowable expenses, inaccurate invoice amount, missing authorized signatures. Invoice processing time. CDSS typically has a processing time of 30 days, and the State Controller's Office is around 15 days. Semi-annual certification activity. A semi-annual certificate of activity is required for full-time employees and must be signed every 6 months by the employee and supervisor, then maintained on file with the prime contractor. The template will be provided by your program analyst. Here is an example of a semi-annual certificate of activity. If you need any technical assistance or have any questions, please contact your program analyst. Thank you.